Welcome back to Bit by Bit. Today I'm very excited. I've got Bitcoin Q+A joining me for a second time. Last time we discussed wallets, and today we're going to be talking about nodes. We're going to talk about what they are, how to run them, and why to run them. If you haven't already listened to our last episode, I suggest you go back and have a listen. When you're learning about Bitcoin and learning how to use it, there's kind of an order of things. You're not really going to be setting up a node before you have a wallet running, and you're also not really going to be able to use a wallet properly without any Bitcoin. So, if you're listening now and you haven't already got a little bit of Bitcoin, check out my sponsor, CoinFloor UK. It's really, really simple, and they're Bitcoin only. For anyone who already has a wallet set up and already has some Bitcoin, enjoy. Bitcoin Q&A, how are you, my robot friend?
Yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. I'm looking forward to diving into our conversation today. I've just literally finished editing the last one, and it's ready to go live today, this evening. So looking forward to getting that one live.
So this is number 2.
This is number 2. That's going to go live first, and then this one a week later. So anyone who's listening to this now will hopefully have already listened to our last conversation, which was talking about wallets, everything to do with wallets, everything you need to know, and all the different types of wallets. And yeah, after recording that one, I reached straight out to you, didn't I? I was just like, right, we need to do this again because it was a really good episode. And I think that, wallets is part of it and one of the useful things that people need to learn. And then sort of the next step up and how to really become a power user, you need to run a node. So we'll jump into it today.
It kind of feels like the natural progression, doesn't it? You know, we discussed last time around the importance of holding your own keys and what that means to the average user. And I suppose, like you just said, running your own node is kind of the next natural step, really.
Okay, so I think if we go through it a little bit like we did last time, I think that was good, and we managed to cover most, if not all of it, and we kind of do the same again. So we start right at the beginning. What is a node?
Okay, let's try and keep this as basic as possible. Keep those buzzwords out of this one if we can. So a node is basically a term for a computer or a piece of software that runs the Bitcoin software, the Bitcoin core software, basically. So what that software does is effectively it's your gateway into the Bitcoin network. It's where your transactions are broadcast from and received into. So again, we touched on wallets last time. So you can't use a wallet connected to the Bitcoin network without using a node. So one of the key points I think I would like everybody listening to this to remember too is that if you are not using your own node, you are absolutely 100% using somebody else's. So, I'm sure we'll get onto the nuances of that later and what that means. But essentially, a Bitcoin node is your gateway into the network, and it's how you interact with the network. So, a couple of things, key things that a node will do. It's basically your enforcer of your very own Bitcoin rule set. So you can kind of think of it like it stops you being cheated. It kind of checks all of your incoming transactions, checks that those transactions meet the expected requirements, so that you're not being cheated and being sold sent fake Bitcoin, so to speak, and that somebody's not trying to send you something that isn't what the network agrees is the rightful Bitcoin, so to speak. So you can think of it as something that's watching your back and sort of verifying all of your incoming transactions to say, yeah, that matches the rule set that I'm running, So I agree that this is Bitcoin and it abides by all of the rules, which we could probably cover off in a bit more detail later.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, look at it as somebody, a piece of software that's looking out for you, basically, to check that you're not being cheated.
Okay, all right. And I've heard someone say before that it's kind of like if you bring it back into like physical world stuff, that if you're dealing in, say, gold, this node is one of the things it's doing is effectively it's like smelting down and checking that gold is real and it's not a false transaction that someone's trying to put through. And that's kind of one of the things that your node is doing, is checking that, like you're saying, it's watching out for you, but it's just checking that you are really receiving Bitcoin. It's the real deal. And if you're running your own node, there's no way for someone to, if you're doing it properly anyway, there's no way that anyone can cheat you.
Yeah, exactly. And like I touched on before, if you're just using one of the basic wallets that's not connected to your own node, essentially what you're doing there is you're using somebody else's node to verify your transactions for you. Now, the chances of that node being malicious are potentially slim, but ultimately you are trusting that person's node. So in theory, that company or whoever's node it is could effectively sort of they could censor your transactions. They could sort of paint a different picture of Bitcoin for you, so to speak. So you might think that you're receiving what you think is Bitcoin, and that could be on a completely different blockchain. That say, it could be, say, on a blockchain that's got 100 million Bitcoin rather than the 21 million Bitcoin that you and I and the rest of the network agree on.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think, like you say, it's like a piece of software. Watching your back is a really good way to put it. It's the safest way and the best way that you can do things. So if we take a step back, and from hopefully everyone that's listening has already listened to our conversation about wallets, and for anyone who hasn't, I suggest you go and listen to that one first. It was about 3 episodes ago. I'll link it in the show notes as well. But from that point where we kind of finished on, if you're using a hardware wallet, use a cold card. Since then, we've had Ledger leak everyone's details, which is not great. So if anyone listened to that and even thought about using a Ledger, I'd probably say now avoid them. But yeah, but so say you've gone for a cold card hardware wallet, or you've gone for Samourai, and you're running that on your phone. If you're just now using, let's just say Samourai on the phone, because that's what probably most people would do to start. What if they don't run a node at this point? They've set up Samourai. Who is it that they're trusting? Whose node are they asking?
So in the Samourai example, they are trusting Samourai's servers, Samourai nodes, wherever they may be across the world. So again, I'm a massive fan of the Samourai guys. I very much doubt that they're malicious actors. But ultimately, there is always that sort of very slight element of doubt that if you're just using the wallet in its most basic form and connecting to their servers, ultimately you are putting a little bit of trust into them acting in good faith, and to sort of serve up the Bitcoin that you expect to be receiving, on the correct chain. So yeah, there is, and Samourai is no different. If whoever's node that you're connected to, you always got that level of trust, and that they're going to act in good faith, basically.
Okay, all right, cool. So we now assume that most people who are listening to this have got a wallet already. So now they're interested in, okay, this sounds better to have the node, but why? I think there's probably going to be more to it than just there's not that person in the middle, because some people are prepared to accept that little bit of trust. It's not what we would probably advise, but some people will be. Are there any other reasons to run a node?
So obviously, depending on the implementation, it does grant you other functions, things like access to Lightning. Again, you don't necessarily need your own node to interact with the Lightning network, but some of the implementations give you that option. There's also other things such as coin join applications. Again, you get that optionality, or you can run a BTCPay Server, which is basically like your own online store, which I think is, particularly for online merchants, that's quite a powerful option in terms of it would give you the optionality to receive, censorship resistant payments. There's no PayPal or anybody like that can stand in your way from receiving, funds from whoever's buying your product online, basically. So I think that's quite a powerful tool. You can also get access to your own what's known as a block explorer. So one of the most common ones that people would, listening to this, that would use will probably be something like blockstream.info. So essentially what that is kind of a data set of the current state of the network, where you can look at the latest stats on transactions, blocks. You can see where your transaction sits within the mempool, the pool of transactions that are waiting to be confirmed. And if you run your own node, you can actually run your own local copy of that. So if you were to be, let's say you sent some sats over to me, Max, and the network's quite busy as it is at the moment, and you were wondering where that transaction is in the queue, so to speak, in the mempool, you could look at your own block explorer. You could put the transaction identification number in to your own block explorer, and you could sort of check up on that transaction to see where it sits in a private way. Because again, if you were querying somebody else's node like blockstream.info, which is again one of the common ones, there's a potential threat model there that they know that your IP address, because obviously you're accessing it online, they can associate your IP address with that transaction ID. So
could you just dig a little bit deeper onto that? Because a lot of people who are listening to this won't sort of maybe be aware of the surveillance companies that are lurking in the background. And, obviously we're trying to use this as privately as possible. And if someone's not running a VPN, and in the case that you've just talked about, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think I should probably start by saying I like to act online as if somebody's watching, because effectively that's what your internet provider can see all of your internet traffic. So if you're just going onto Google, you're typing in your transaction ID, if that's those stats that you just sent to me, you're going on to blockstream.info. Essentially, you should work on the thought process that your IP, your internet provider can see everything that you're doing, and so can Blockstream. So you go onto Blockstream's website, you type in that transaction ID. So now theoretically, Blockstream knows that this transaction belongs to your IP address. Your internet provider knows exactly that you sent some stats to me. They know all the details about that transaction because you've just done it over the internet, so they can see all that traffic. So I suppose that's where the power of running your own node on your own local network. You're sort of querying your own version of the Bitcoin network, and so you're not leaking any of that sensitive personal data out to all of these potential adversaries. So your internet provider, blockstream.info, potentially anybody else who could be spying on your network. And I suppose just to go to the extremes, if you were doing this in a internet cafe perhaps, and you're just doing that over ClearNet, the regular internet, there's potentially people could be spying on you there as well. So I think it's quite a powerful thing to remember, to be mindful that just always work on the thought process that somebody might be watching. And so just tying it back into the node thing, again, if you're running your own node locally and you've got your own block explorer, you can ask the questions of a piece of software that you trust, that's not being broadcast out to the wider world.
Okay. And so is there anything else to consider before someone just dives in and thinks, right, okay, I'm gonna try this? what else is there to consider when thinking about running a node?
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to, obviously, everybody's operates on different budgets. Depends what sort of hardware you've got lying around. I'm sure we'll cover off the different types. So you obviously you've got to look at which hardware you need to run it, your technical abilities of, some of these things are easier to run than others. Your needs in terms of what do you actually need to get out from a node. Can you just get by with just the basic software? You just want it to validate your transactions and that's it. Technical abilities I've covered. You've also got internet availability and speeds. Again, not really a problem in most of the Western world these days. You've also got storage considerations. The current size of the network at the moment. Current size of the blockchain at the moment is around about 300 gigabytes. So obviously, if you've got just a little notebook with a 128 gigabyte hard drive, you're not going to be able to run a node on that computer. So the storage considerations, and then there's also going back to the hardware, thinking about do you want this device to be always on, always switched on? Again, that's probably not going to be ideal if you've got a big power thirsty gaming desktop or even a laptop that you just don't want to leave switched on all the time. It's going to start drawing quite a lot of power and start costing you, some inflated electricity bills. So what most people tend to do, the most common way to run one of these nodes is to run it on a single board computer, something like a Raspberry Pi 4 or a Rock Pro 64. They're all pretty similar, very slightly in specifications, but they're basically a credit card sized computer that you can sort of, again, depending on the implementations, which I'm sure we'll cover off, you just sort of add the specified software that you want to run onto an SD card, plug in your SSD, your hard drive, and then you can get cracking then with downloading the blockchain and implementing this software. So again, I think we'll get into the specifics of the different types later on, but yeah, those are some of the considerations.
Yeah, and just before we do dive in any further, I just want to say, like, as a non-technical person, I'm sort of getting better as time goes on. But I was actually really I found it quite daunting. Like when I first got involved and people were talking about doing this, and it kind of scared me off a little bit because I was like, oh, that sounds really complicated. It sounds like it's not really something that I'm going to be able to do. But once I dived in, first of all, it was easy, even for someone like me. It really wasn't that difficult. And secondly, I actually really enjoyed the process of doing it. It was fun because, like, to actually build the thing and to play around with it, like, it was a little project and it took a day, and it was actually a really enjoyable thing to do. So for anyone who's listening and, like, some of this maybe sounds a little bit daunting, yeah, don't be too put off, because it is a lot of fun and there are so many different options out there, and I'm sure that for almost anyone there's an option that's going to work for them. So
I think
what options are there? Sorry, go on.
I think that just going back to completely echo your point around, there's a lot of technical terms thrown around when you talk about nodes, but absolute credit to the guys that sort of have put these projects together that we're going to cover off in a minute. They've really sort of obfuscated away a lot of the difficulty. It really is super simple to get one up and running. So yeah, I just wanted to shout out to all of the teams out there, because they really are. They're the ones that are putting in the work to make this as easy as possible for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And so there are lots of different teams working on lots of different projects, and there are some great ones out there. So what are the different options?
So I think I'll probably split them into three categories. I'll start from the easiest, which is basically you download what's called Bitcoin Core, which is essentially a piece of software that you would download onto an existing piece of hardware, i.e. a laptop with enough storage or a desktop, you literally just go onto bitcoincore.org, I think it is, hit download. That's got a simple graphical user interface. There's a couple of clicks. You'll start downloading the blockchain. It'll download itself onto the hard drive of the computer that you've sort of downloaded it on. That will take, depending on your internet speed and your hardware, between 2 and 4 days. And that's the simplest, cheapest, and fastest way to do it. Again, it comes with the drawbacks of if you're downloading it onto a laptop or a desktop, that software is only running when that device is running. So that'd probably be the easiest and the fastest and cheapest way to do it. The second easiest way would be to buy sort of a plug and play node box, so to speak. So some examples of them, you've got the Nodl Dojo, and also the Nodl, just the generic Nodl. What that essentially is a single board computer, comes all packaged up, ready to go. It's literally just a box. You order it online, it turns up at your house, you plug it into your router, switch it on, you'd access it via a local web page. So you literally just go on, pop in the IP address of the device that's assigned by your router. Again, it comes with a really simple graphical user interface, point and click, nice and simple. And it's designed to be in a box that just sort of sits next to your router. Perhaps it's always on. It's a low power consumption device. It's kind of a set it and forget it device that you just sort of interact with via a web page effectively. And another one that's exactly the same as that, just built by a different company, is the myNode 1, which probably comes with one of the most easiest user interface that's out there at the moment. I think that's the one you run, is it, Max?
Yeah, I run a myNode, so I built mine from a Raspberry Pi and chose a cool case that I wanted and a fan and all the different bits and pieces. So I had the sort of joy of putting it together, but then I paid the $99 for the premium, whatever they call it, myNode Premium. And I love it. Like it really is like so slick and so simple that once it was actually built and set up, I was like, oh, what was all the fuss about? Like this is so slick. This isn't like cypherpunky, someone, who really knows what they're doing. This is like, honestly, once it's set up, I could probably teach my mum.
Yeah. So just to finish off with the sort of plug and play boxes, the myNode 1 and the Nodl and the Nodl Dojo, obviously they come with the simplicity of they are literally just plug and play, plug it into your router and you're away. Obviously they cost slightly more because obviously these companies need to make a profit. So you're looking at the myNode 1, you're looking at just over $400. I've no idea what that converts into pounds. The Nodl, the standard one is $499, and then there's the Nodl Dojo, the beast, the red beast, which is pretty sexy if you ask me. I think that retails, when you can get a hold of one, because they are quite rare, around $849. So they do come at an increased cost, particularly the Nodl Dojo. But again, they come with extra features like the Nodl Dojo. It's got 2 storage. It's got 2 SSDs for redundancy. It's got encrypted backup. So that's kind of like the Bugatti of the nodes, if you like.
And it's red, isn't it? So it's faster.
It's red. It's definitely faster, and it definitely looks the best. So we've covered Bitcoin Core, the simplest and cheapest way. We've covered the plug and play boxes, and then I think probably the most common way to do it, and in my opinion, the best way to do it, because you learn along the way, is when you sort of buy the hardware yourself. So again, you're looking at a Raspberry Pi 4, an Ethernet cable, an SD card, an SSD, which is a hard drive, solid state hard drive. Would also always recommend a solid state one over a spinning disk type, just for performance improvements really. Hard disk drives can sometimes fail, And
Yeah.
for the minimal extra cost of a solid state one, I would always advise everybody to go for one of them just for reliability and longevity, really.
Yeah.
So that's the hardware that you'd need. Then it's just a case of picking the project that you want to go with. So the main three at the moment is we've touched on already: the myNode software. The pros of the myNode software probably got the easiest user interface. It's literally just a point and click user interface. Everything's packaged really nicely, looks really good when you access it via your local web page. Everything comes just really intuitive. I think you'll agree, Max.
Yeah, definitely. It's really, really easy to use. It's so slick. It's just, I don't know, it just looks nice. You can choose dark mode. You can have just, I don't know, it's everything that I wanted and more out of a node. And the ease of putting the thing together and paying it's a one-off $99 fee, and that's just a way of supporting the devs who have put in all this work and made it so easy to use and made so many other projects accessible from it, that I think it's an amazing price.
Yeah, it is, and I'll probably just because it's probably the common one at the moment. Before I move on to the other two projects, I'll just give a quick rundown of what that actually comes with. So obviously you've got the core Bitcoin software, which we've covered. You've got a LND, which is a Lightning node, which sits on top of your Bitcoin implementation. I'm sure we'll cover off Lightning a little bit later on. You've got Electrum Server, which is basically, without going into too much detail, it's kind of like a wallet connection interface. So if you've got your cold card, or if you've got your most of your mobile wallets will connect via Electrum Server. The premium bit that you just touched on gives you remote access via the Tor browser, so you can sort of just download Tor browser on your phone, and that will give you a special onion address that you can so you can tinker with your node from anywhere in the world, basically in a super private way. What else we've got? We've got RTL, which is a Ride the Lightning. That's effectively like a Lightning node manager. It just sits on top of your Lightning node. And lets you manage all your channels. You can open new ones, close them, make Lightning payments, things like that. You've also got BTCPay Server, which obviously I've covered off before. You've got a BTC Explorer, again I've covered that before. You've got Dojo and Whirlpool, my two favorites. So Dojo is the back end for your Samourai wallet. I'll come on to Samourai just a touch more in a sec. The Whirlpool is that is your 24/7 CoinJoin mixing service. So that's kind of like if you're a Samourai user, that's sort of the holy grail of CoinJoin, basically. You kind of set it and forget it, and you sit back and relax and get 24/7 remixing. Another favorite of mine is the Mempool Viewer, which is probably one of the ones that I use the most out of all of my node features. Gives you a beautiful visualization of the current state of the mempool. So if you're looking to make a transaction, it's pretty useful. You can just hop on there, look at your own local mempool, again without leaking any private information. You can see what sort of a fee rate would probably be best to use based on how fast you want that transaction to confirm onto the blockchain. And then these are all the newer apps that have recently been added. You've got Caravan, which is like a multi-sig quorum. You've got Specter, which is the same again. It's for creating and managing multi-sig wallets. Finally, you've got LNBits and Thunderhub, which again are sort of Lightning wallet tools. So it's myNode, yeah, it's fantastic. It's like the Swiss Army knife of Bitcoin nodes at the moment. Just so it's not all, I'm not painting it to be a massively rosy picture. My only criticism, I think, is Taylor, the main dev. Obviously, what he's achieved is fantastic, but because he does it on his own, sometimes the upgrades can bust a few things, and occasionally, if you upgrade too quickly, you might run into a little bit of trouble. So just one thing to be wary of. And me personally, I always hang back with the latest upgrades, and just make sure that everything's running smoothly for a couple of other users before we take the plunge. Especially if we've got some funds on that node, it pays to be a bit cautious, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's the same sort of, I find with everything with Bitcoin, it's never that much of a bad idea to hold back a little bit and wait a couple of months, or just check that things are working, because it's different to a lot of other software. If something crashes on your computer, normally like you don't lose money, but like you said, if you've got funds sat there, then if something went wrong, potentially you could lose them. So it's better to be cautious.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the sort of the second one of the popular node implementations, is the only one of the three I'm talking about now that I haven't actually ran, so I can't speak from any level of authority, basically. But in terms of feature set, it's very similar to myNode, with a little bit more focus on the Lightning side of things. I get the impression that the team from Raspiblitz, they're kind of a bit more cautious and a bit slower to release upgrades, but the impression I get is that when they upgrade, it's kind of everything's battened down, and there's generally no everything's battle tested, so to speak. And I'd probably say from what I've seen, the Raspiblitz probably doesn't come with as an intuitive user interface, so perhaps more for the slightly intermediate user. But one I would like to run in the future, because it does look like a really promising project, and we've got a couple of tools there that I'd like to try out. And finally, the last one of the three build your own node implementations is the RoninDojo, which I'm personally really, really fired up about at the moment. They've got a big release coming out on Sunday. I've actually been working with them to do some quality testing. So this is basically the Samourai users node built by Samourai users for Samourai users. So you won't get any of your Lightning applications or anything like that on the RoninDojo. It's very much focused around being the ultimate companion for your Samourai wallet. So you've got your basics there. Obviously, you've got your Bitcoin core software. You've got your Electrum Server, which I've touched on. So you can connect any wallet to this RoninDojo. It's just geared more towards Samourai. You've got your Whirlpool CLI, which I touched on earlier, which is your 24/7 remixing service. You've got your own block explorer, and you've got your own sort of Dojo maintenance tool, which provides arguably the easiest way to connect your wallet to a node. It's essentially, you open the app, you scan a QR code, boom, that's it. You're connected to your own node. It honestly couldn't be any simpler than that. I think that's one of the main positives for me, is it's just literally scan a QR code and boom, you're connected to your own node.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that they've got in being released pretty soon is awesome. They've got let me just pull it up so I don't butcher it, or the guys will shoot me. Yeah, so they've got their own graphical user interface coming out. That's got built-in Whirlpool control. They're bringing out encrypted backups, redundant storage, hardware wallet integration. I think this is going to be a big one. They're going to be enabling the ability for you to use post-mix spending tools such as Stonewall or Stowaway and things like that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those.
I get the basic concept, but maybe you could just explain.
Yeah, so again, one of the most powerful things about the Samourai wallet is their post-mix spending tool. So once you've used their Whirlpool service, you've effectively broken what's called deterministic links. So you've given your UTXOs, your Bitcoin, sort of a clean past against anybody, chain surveillance verbs that might be tracking you on the blockchain. Once you've been through that Whirlpool service, you've kind of broken those deterministic links, and anybody looking on chain will look at that Whirlpool transaction, and they will not be able to say for sure which of the inputs match which of the outputs. So you've effectively broken those ties. Now, obviously, there's other CoinJoin services about, and where most of them fall down is that once they've sort of been through that mix structure, which I've just touched on, there's what a lot of users do is then kind of put it all back together again in one big lump, which effectively completely undoes the whole point of mixing. So they kind of paying all these fees to mix all their sats, great, and then they press select all, and they sort of send it back to their hardware wallet, merge it all back together again, and sort of effectively tell anybody that's watching on chain, yeah, they can follow it from A to B basically. So the post-mix spending tools give you a way to spend those UTXOs, those pieces of Bitcoin that have been sort of mixed. It allows you to spend them in a privacy-focused way, so as not to harm all any of the privacy that you've gained from using the CoinJoin service. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. There's Stonewall, which is like a fake mini CoinJoin. You effectively mix with yourself, but the way the transaction is constructed, nobody looking on chain will be able to tell that you are effectively mixing with yourself. You've got Stowaway, which is an implementation of the pay-to-end point. So again, we're getting pretty technical here, but the post-mix spend tools, effectively, they're just tools that you can spend to other people, other Samourai users or not Samourai users, depending on the tool that you want to use, to spend in a private way that maintains your privacy after you've been through the Whirlpool service. Mm-hmm. So tying that back into RoninDojo, that is one of the core services they offer. Probably the easiest way to implement that as well. So I think that covers off the three main ones pretty well.
Yeah, and so that means that so for someone who's thinking about running one, you've broken that down nicely. So there's the three different options, and also it's kind of different price points as well, because maybe if someone's just dipping their toes in and they've bought a small amount of Bitcoin, they probably don't want to go out and spend $700-800 on an all singing, all dancing node. They're probably not going to want to do that. It doesn't really make sense for them unless they're like fascinated by the tech. So for someone like that, maybe they could say, okay, well, if I have the storage space, I can actually do it for free, and that is an option.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that's definitely an option. And a lot of people, even if they are fairly heavily invested in using Bitcoin, will still go for that option. It is still a great option. It's just obviously, like you said, you have to have that computer running to use it, and it will take up a lot of storage and all that kind of stuff. So that's one, but it's free.
Yes, yeah, it's free. But again, like you say, it comes with the trade-offs that it's got to be on a device that's always on. It's no good if you've got Bitcoin Core on a laptop, you've got your wallet connected to it, but you're on the other side of the country and your laptop's switched off. You can't connect to that node. That's where the power, why these single board computers like the Raspberry Pi running RoninDojo or anything like that. Mm-hmm. The whole point of them is that they sit there, they're quiet, they don't cost a lot to run. They're just always sat there waiting for you to use them to transact or to receive or anything like that.
Yeah, and then like you said, the one that you would suggest, and for me as well, I would suggest, is that to actually build one of these things, and I think for me it cost about 250 quid, I want to say, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right, yeah.
250 quid for the hardware and about 7 quid for a bottle of wine and my evening, and that was it. And like I say, it genuinely was one of the most enjoyable evenings I've had to do with Bitcoin. I love listening to podcasts, I love messing around with this stuff, but I really enjoyed actually like building something physical, something that wasn't software, something that wasn't hypothetical or theoretical. It was just like I can sit down and follow the instructions and build something, and I've got something in front of me. I felt quite like I'd achieved something afterwards. It was nice.
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier, but the actual process of going through and doing the build it yourself, I personally got a lot out of it, and I think it gives you a better appreciation for the sort of inner workings of it. Obviously the average user isn't going to go and sort of audit all the software or anything like that, but I think it gives you that sort of base level of knowledge, so that if you do need to go and do a bit of troubleshooting. Depending on the implementation, again, you've got the tools there to go and poke around a little bit and learn a bit more if you want to. Whereas if you build these pre-packaged ones, they're nice and simple and easy to use, but you might not have that. You might be a bit scared to touch it, so to speak, because you think this is really technical box that some wizards built in a cave somewhere like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for anyone who's sort of falling a bit deeper down the rabbit hole and is really interested in this stuff, it's not only does it mean that you learn more, but also you are really securing your funds better and making sure that if you are using this stuff, it is the best and safest way, which is important.
Yeah, and all of these projects, those 3 projects I've just mentioned, they've all got Telegram groups. They've all got a presence on Twitter, and particularly the Samourai focus groups. Again, the RoninDojo guys. The support there is there's literally somebody there 24/7 to hold your hand on anything that you want to do, because there's quite a big community built around it. And that's the same for the myNode group and whatnot. And so don't be afraid to, if you do get stuck, there's loads of guides out there. There's video guides, or hop into one of these Telegram groups and just ask a question. The guys there, believe it or not, they've heard all of the questions. There's no stupid one, and they're well aware that this might be anybody's first foray into any form of, building together even the most low-powered computer like a Raspberry Pi, and they're sort of wise to that, and they're all too welcome to take questions.
Yeah, and like I've said before, anyone who wants to reach out, although I'm probably not as anywhere near as helpful as some of the other people you've mentioned, but I'm always happy to help people if they want a hand. And I know you're the same with your website, so no one's going to buy it if you try and build one of these things and you have questions. I have found that the Bitcoin community and like everyone who I've ever dealt with has been so helpful. I've never had anyone make me feel ashamed to ask, or like I'm asking a stupid question, although I'm sure I have asked really stupid questions. People are very, very welcoming and helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Don't be afraid to ask. It's personally the way I've learned. And, I've learned more from those Telegram groups and asking what I thought at the time with the stupid questions. That's where you learn, and you see the sort of common faults, and you sort of gain that ability to be able to help other people as well. And that's ultimately how the community grows, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And there's always something around the corner that, once you've accomplished that, there'll be something else you want to learn. And it's what makes it exciting. If it was just, here's this thing, like, it's useful to send payments and it's going to become more valuable, like, it wouldn't really, I don't think it would hold all our interest quite so much. I think it's the fact that it is constantly changing, and like there's always just something new and interesting and like world changing that's happening, and that the people who are doing it just like blow my mind how smart they are and like how they do this stuff. But then they're so humble and they're just willing to help people, and you don't really get that in other industries. Like you're not going to find people who would be so helpful. And I think it's just because it's really early days, and the people who are involved genuinely believe that this is going to change the world, so they want to help people.
Yeah, exactly. And again, those 3 projects that I've just covered off, they're all being actively worked on, and so like you say, they're almost changing by the week, these projects, with slow, steady improvements to make user experience easier, or it's simpler to connect to it, or add in the next feature, or they're all ever-changing beasts, and it's all geared towards making it easier, because at the end of the day, it doing all this sort of node running stuff from the outside looking in, if you've got no technical background whatsoever, it can seem really scary. So I think even in the last 12 months, the whole node space has come a really, really long way, and I'm just really excited to see what it looks like in another 12 months, because this stuff's just getting easier and easier.
Yeah, it is amazing how quickly it's moving. And I think the other thing that we sort of, we've covered, so just like taking a step back, we've covered obviously from running your wallet, why it's important to have your node and how it's safer and also some of the amazing things that you can do with it that you mentioned. But also, and I think it's really important to say that the more nodes that are on this network, like if you believe in Bitcoin and you think that this is something that the world is better off having, the more nodes that we have running, the better for the system. So maybe you could kind of go into that just a little bit. We don't have to go too crazy technical, but what does just running a node do for the system?
Yeah, so one of Bitcoin's major benefits is its decentralization. So what does that mean? That basically just means how distributed participants in the network are. There's people all over the world, in almost every country in the world, I'm probably willing to bet, participating in the network, running nodes, or even mining. So why is that a powerful thing? It basically means that it would take a sort of coordinated attack from multiple countries at once, if not all of them, to go and sort of stop people running nodes and sort of to stop the network. So the more people and the more distributed all of this node network is across the globe, the harder it is to stop. Think of it like a virus spreading across the world. The bigger it is, the harder it is.
I can't imagine that.
That's quite apt timing, that is. Unfortunately, lockdown can't stop Bitcoin, which is nice. So I suppose to link it back to the protocol itself, obviously you may have listeners listening to this may have heard of like the block size wars. So to link that into the sort of nodes talk, there was two factions back in 2017, I think it was, that one wanted to increase the block size, and one wanted to keep it the same. So the implications of increasing the block size basically meant that the blockchain would grow at a much greater rate. So the impact to the end user or the end node runner would mean that rather than needing, say, 300 gigabytes that the current Bitcoin blockchain is, if that block space was doubled, it would effectively, the blockchain would grow twice as fast. So that would mean that in the not too distant future, to run your own Bitcoin node, there's absolutely no way you'd be able to do it on a little Raspberry Pi the size of a credit card with your own hard drive. You'd need a massive server farm. So if that was the case and these sort of so-called big blockers did win, in the future it would have become very difficult for the average user to participate in the Bitcoin network the right way, in my opinion, by running their own node. So that would lead to a few powerful parties, the people with access to the powerful server farms that could run the Bitcoin software with this powerful equipment, which would centralize the power into a few hands. There's the saying now, I'm probably going to butcher it, but something along the lines of too much power in too few hands is not a good outcome. So again, that's why it's important that we keep the block size as small as possible, so that blockchain doesn't grow too fast, which makes it easier for you and I to run our own node and keep that network as decentralized and as hard to stop as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And like we're talking now, because we haven't increased the block size, it is possible to run these without really that much power and without crazy amounts of storage. And like you said, that is so important because the whole point in this is it's peer-to-peer and that you can verify everything yourself. And if you do let it centralized, then you can't do that, and then all the magic is gone. It's not pointless, but it's not as good.
Just to put that into context, obviously the network's been running since 2009 or 2010, and somebody spinning up a node today, so what are we, 11, 12 years later, can verify on a 30 £38 single board computer, they can verify every single transaction since the inception of the network. They can verify every transaction made on the entire network for the entire history of it in, I suppose, the worst case scenario is probably about 5 days. So I think, again, absolute credit to the people that are working on this that fought to keep the block size small so that it allows regular users to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about that, like how many transactions, and that you can just from, like you say, like a £30 computer, you can say, or or even just from your own computer, you don't even have to spend the £30. You just have to spend the time to download, which we'll
Just
go
run
into
Bitcoin Core,
initial.
yeah.
We'll go into initial block download and what that means and stuff in a sec. But yeah, I mean, that is like, there's nothing else on the planet that you can do that and verify that the supply is correct, and you can see all the transactions and all this stuff. And the fact that they've managed to make it so efficient is just amazing.
Yeah, the fact that you can do it on a computer that fits inside your jeans pocket. It still amazes me when I sit there and look at my Raspberry Pi on my desk at home, and you just think, that holds a copy of every transaction ever made on the network. It's just mind blowing.
You've talked a couple of times now about this 3 to 5 days that it takes to download basically a copy of all these transactions. So what is that called? Why does it take that time? And is there any way of making that take less storage or take less time, or do we have to have the whole thing, or is there something else that people can do?
Yeah, so that is called the initial block download. So you are, again, any of the implementations that we've talked about today run the same sort of underlying software, where you would basically download it, set it off running, and it will then speak to the network, to the nodes around it, and it will sort of get information from them to say, okay, tell me what your version of events is, and it will slowly download all of Bitcoin's history. And when it's downloading all of those history, all of those blocks, which are all of the previous transactions, it's verifying those blocks against its own inbuilt rule set that was in the software that you downloaded initially. And so it slowly sits there churning away between, again, depending on your hardware, between 2 and 5 days, and sits there verifying every single one, as we touched on before, checking that they all, there's no cheating, checking that they all adhere to the rule set that's built into the software that you've downloaded. And basically it just slowly churns away, catches up to the current day. So again, that'll take between 2 and 5 days, and will take up around about 300 gigabytes at the moment on a hard drive. So you mentioned about, is there anything that a user could do to take up less space? So I'll preface this with that there currently isn't a way for you not to have to download it all initially, but there is a setting called pruned mode, which basically tells the software to say, once you've downloaded it and validated it, if it's not sort of current and up to date, throw it away. So you're only keeping the most up to date sort of transaction set. However, you do still have to go from day one and verify them all, which I think is very important, because obviously that is the nature of the blockchain, is that all of these transactions are linked together. So it's important that you verify every single one for yourself to check that there's no cheating. And if you so wish, you can choose to switch on pruned mode. And I think I've never ran a pruned mode, but I think it cuts it down to somewhere around or slightly less than 5 gigabytes. So a massive decrease.
Yeah.
And the only trade-off with that is obviously your node isn't able then to sort of participate in the network, in the fact that it can't help other nodes start up. So if there was another node to start up and ask your node, say, hey, can you tell me what your version of events are? You haven't got that version of events saved, so to speak. You've had it, validated it, and thrown it away. So it's not really a massive risk, but obviously if everybody was to do this, it might cause issues in the future. But the fact that you've got to go to the trouble of downloading it in the first place, most people just keep it just to sort of support the network, so to speak.
I guess there's just sort of niche cases where, you know, someone might not want to go and buy the extra hardware and they might want to run it on their PC or laptop. And then they say, well, you know, I don't really want to use 300 and whatever it is gig. And then obviously growing over time. Right now, maybe in the future I'll do it. So they might do that, and then they free up the space on there. So, although like it's not, I think I bought 1 terabyte SSD, and it was a good one for, I don't know, it was about 110 quid or
that's
something.
About the going rate from
it's not like, you know, obviously you can do it cheaper and you can do the prune node and all this sort of stuff, which is great to have the option, but it's not crazy money.
Not really. And like you say, these SSDs, these hard drives, they're built for longevity. They're going to last a long time. So, you know, for me, it makes sense if you're going through the pain of having to wait between 2 and 5 days to do the initial block download. You know, if you can afford to keep the storage, it makes sense, really.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Well, I think we've kind of covered the basics of, or at least I think you can tell me if I've missed anything, but we've covered the basics of why someone might want to run a node. If they do decide that they want to run a node, the different options they have. Then we've talked about sort of the different things that it helps unlock, like the sort of superpowers it unlocks and why it's safer. Is there anything else that we've not gone through for people who don't run nodes yet? Because if there isn't anything we've missed, then what I'd like to do is actually pick your brains myself as someone who runs a node. And I don't think I'm the only person who does this. I run a node, but I don't really use it that much yet. And I'd like to use some of the features a little bit more and actually use it to its full potential.
Yeah, so I think we've covered the basics. All I will say is use the opportunity to shill a little bit. I've got a node comparison on my website, which sort of lists all the features and the pros and cons of each of the ones that I've talked about today. So there's people that go and have a look at that before you take the plunge. It might help identify sort of what's important to you. You know, like I say, these have got slightly different features. You know, if you want absolute simplicity and don't mind spending a bit more, you might decide to go for plug and play. If you are absolutely hell-bent on having lightning features, you would naturally gravitate more towards Raspiblitz or the myNode. Or if you're a diehard Samourai fan, you're obviously going to default to that RoninDojo. So it just comes down to running a node should without guilt be looked at as a selfish thing. Don't do it because you want to support the network. Do it because you want it to work for you and you want it to have your back, like we touched on earlier.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to link that in the show notes, but for anyone who's listening and might want to type it in now, it's bitcoinqna.com.
That's it. Yeah. And the extension for the comparison thing is /node compare.
Once you get actually onto your website, it's really easy to navigate. You know, everything's laid out really simply, and it's actually, I said to you before, it's actually kind of similar to the myNode layout, and so now I always have my myNode stuff up, and I have yours, and now I have both my screens look really slick and put together well. So
yeah, do you know what? That's now you said it on the first podcast we did. I can't unsee it now, and I kind of feel a little bit bad. I hope Taylor doesn't think that I've just blatantly copied his style.
They should take that as a compliment. I would, if I'd have done that, I'd have take that as a compliment. I think it looks awesome. I think myNode's done a great job, and your website's brilliant as well. And like I say, because I have the two screens together, it all ties in nicely, which makes my office look better. So I'm very happy about that.
Glad to be of service.
So and honestly, like I've said it before, but it really is a service, and what you're doing is so useful, and it's helped me a lot. It's something that I've been digging in like more and more with your website, because it's so good. Bite size little bits where you don't have to sort of open up an article and it's takes you 2 hours to read through it, and it's like crazy technical and difficult, and it puts me off a lot of the time. Whereas with yours, like, I can just think, oh, okay, what is it I want to learn about CoinJoin today, and I click through, and you've just got everything in just really simplified, nice way of going through it. And then if I want to go into more detail, I can, and you've got all the links. So you've done an amazing job. And for anyone again who's listening now and you haven't, definitely go and check it out. It's I really think it's one of, if not the best resource out there at the moment.
Very kind, appreciate it, and it's nice to hear that. That's exactly what I'm going for. Is short and to the point resources that people can go and just learn about a specific subject without getting too much into the weeds, and then signposting them on to sort of more in-depth resources if they want to delve a little bit deeper. The only other thing I would add is probably make sure you check out the article section as well. I've written a fair few pieces on sort of the common things that people are going to see and touch, and the common wallets, the common hardware wallets, bits about just a couple of the node software. We've got one on RoninDojo, got one on myNode, and where it goes a little bit into the specifics of a specific product, so you can delve a little bit deeper. So just make sure you check them out as well.
Yeah, and so for people who had listened to our wallet conversation as well, and you'd obviously said like Blue Wallet or Samourai, you've got articles for both of those on there. So if people want to dig a little bit deeper, definitely go and check those out.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so now selfishly, I'd like to pick your brains if that's all right.
Feel free, yeah.
I hope that it is useful for other people, because like I said, I don't think I'm the only person that's like crazy excited about Bitcoin and just kind of was like, right, the thing to do is run a node, and I'm going to do that, and I set it up, and now kind of it sits there, and I do the upgrades and I see the things that are happening, and like I played around with some of it, but I think I said to you before, my goal is to have my website, have BTCPay Server running, have anything that I earn from my sales on there that then goes straight into my hardware wallet via, whichever is going to be the best system, Electrum personal server or something like that. But I haven't actually set it all up properly yet. So for someone who, let's just say someone like me who's got myNode running, and let's just say that's all you've done, you haven't got the other bits, what would you suggest is first step that someone can take to getting to that kind of setup where you could be in, well, just using Bitcoin and you're in that circular economy?
All right, so I'll use your specific example. Obviously, I'm aware that you run a myNode and you are a Samourai user. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my first recommendation for you would be connect your Samourai wallet to your Dojo. So again, just for a bit of context, obviously Samourai is the mobile wallet, the best one out there if you ask me. And Dojo is just like put it simply, as like a connection assistant that allows you to your mobile wallet to speak to your own node. So Dojo is sort of baked into myNode. So you would basically enable the Dojo on your myNode, which would allow you to then sort of pull up a QR code within the Tor browser that you can scan with your Samourai wallet, and then literally that's it. Your mobile wallet now is talking to your own node. So any transactions that you send or receive, or any wallet queries that you do within Samourai wallet, they're going to be querying your own node. You're not going to be leaking any privacy. You don't need to trust the Samourai servers or anybody else's node. So I think for me, that will be step number one. That's the main reason why you run a node. Don't just run one to support the network. Do it selfishly so that you can verify your own transactions without sort of relying on anybody else. So that'll be step one. I don't know whether have you got that far yet, or?
I haven't got that far, and I'll tell you why. Is that so? Like, I feel comfortable with my Samourai wallet, and I'm I'm trying to be as private as possible, basically. And so I was like, okay, right. Well, I have a separate device to run Samourai on. So it was a case of then going to get a Pixel 3A, and then I flashed graphene onto that, and the Pixel 3A was bought with cash and blah blah blah. I went through all of that stuff. So I'm comfortable now that, right, that's private and the transactions coming out of that are private and it runs over Tor. But what I was worried about was, like, if I then link it to my node, which is then running on my home network, even though I know that my node connects over Tor, like, I was worried that there would somehow be some leak which would then link my IP or leak my IP somehow, and that would then be linked to my transactions, and that it would actually hurt my privacy. And
No,
so
not
I've kind of held back.
yeah, not at all. You're absolutely right. Is that the beauty of both myNode and Samourai is that they both run over Tor, so there's no IP address leakage or anything like that. And again, you do have the optionality to switch both of those off, but they run over Tor by default, and that's basically to protect your privacy. So yeah, obviously you've done some quite relatively advanced steps there in terms of flashing graphene onto your phone. The only sort of hole in that whole process is at the moment is, again, you have a reliance on the Samourai servers, so your transactions are going through their node and not your own. So I would certainly say, take the plunge, enable that Dojo, and all you need to do then is log into your Dojo maintenance tool via the Tor browser. That'll pop straight up with a QR code, and you literally just scan it with your phone, and that's it. You're connected. One word of warning is obviously if you've got any funds in that Samourai wallet right now, they've sort of already been leaked, so to speak, to the Samourai servers. So they sort of know that your wallet address is holding those funds. Obviously, Samourai doesn't operate with any personal identification whatsoever. You don't have to put an email address or anything like that. But it's always good advice to start a fresh wallet when you connect to Dojo, just so you're starting afresh, basically. So you're not kind of creating a wallet, leaking the information, and then sort of trying to take back your privacy. You are sort of starting with the privacy first, and by connecting to your own node, and then you sort of get the funds in there after that. That would be the sort of optimal way to do it.
Okay, and that's easy enough to do. Okay, so I think that's really good advice. So my fears, it's really easy to get just like hyper paranoid, because the more that you think about privacy, like the more that I've started thinking about it, the more I realize like how easy it is to make a mistake, and how many dirty surveillance companies there are out there, and like it sort of it can get, you can get quite paranoid about it, but it's good to know that actually that is a safer way of doing it. So I'll definitely
and
that'll be a project that I'll take on.
These wallet and node teams, by running it over Tor by default, they're kind of making privacy the de facto mode sort of thing, which again, absolute credit to the guys for doing that, in terms of you've already got privacy without even thinking of it. You just run the software and you're already talking, it's all done for you, which is obviously great. And again, it's just adding to that user experience. And when people do inevitably go down that privacy rabbit hole, they start to see the benefits of, oh, this is already running over Tor, which obviously is fantastic.
Okay, that's awesome. So that will definitely be my next project, and I'm hoping to do a video or a walkthrough for other people who will think this is useful as well, and might be running myNode. I'm going to try and do that going forward, so that as I'm learning, other people do as well.
Yeah.
So okay, that'll be the next one, and then so that sort of sorts out my hot wallet and my CoinJoin and linking that to my node, and then that's like that side is as near perfect as it can get. Or as near perfect as it can get for someone like me. I'm sure there are for more advanced users there are other ways, but for me that sounds perfect. So what about then? I've seen that they have Electrum's in there, but is that Electrum personal server or is that just Electrum?
So that is Electrum in terms of myNode. Well, in terms of all of the ones we talked about today, they all run Electrum Rust server, which is kind of
Right.
like a slimmed down version. So what that is effectively, I'll keep it simple as possible, is it kind of sits on top of your Bitcoin node and it indexes the transactions that are relevant to the wallets that you want to connect. So it allows for you to sort of query wallet balances or transactions faster than it would be to use the underlying Bitcoin software. So let's say again, you've set up your myNode and you've got Bitcoin running. You'll then have an option to enable Electrum Rust Server. Well, it's just called Electrum Server on the user interface. Same for the RoninDojo team. Again, it's just a case of enabling it. That'll then take roughly sort of anywhere between 6 hours to 12 hours to sort of index the blockchain. So it's basically going through what you've already downloaded, indexing it, putting it into an easy to read format for itself. So what that'll then, once that's up and running, that will then allow you to connect most wallets. So the common one, if you're talking about hardware wallet interfaces, would be Electrum Desktop Wallet. So again, it's in with the theme of Electrum, which is basically just a desktop wallet interface. Comes with all, I think we touched on it in the last episode, Max, where it comes with all of the basic features, but it also gives you the functionality to connect, say, your cold card or your Trezor or any of your hardware wallets. So it's an interface for you to interact with those hardware wallets and manage their transactions in a way that is private. So where do we get the privacy bit from? So you would download the Electrum desktop wallet, connect that to the Electrum server that is running on your myNode. So those two would talk to one another in a private way. So anytime that you instigate or receive transactions into Electrum desktop, which would be linked to any of your hardware wallets, it's only querying your Electrum server. So again, it comes with all the benefits that we've talked about, so that it's not leaking any of that private information. It's not asking anybody else's node. Again, it's the pinnacle of operating as privately as you can when you're interacting with the network. And the beauty of the hardware wallet integration with Electrum is that obviously your private keys, again, we touched on this last time, your private keys stay on the hardware wallet, which is one of the main benefits of them. So you if somebody got access to your Electrum wallet, without that hardware wallet, they couldn't send any of the funds out of there. That's the sort of added benefit that you get from them. So yeah, Electrum Server, again, really simply just something that indexes the blockchain and allows other wallets to talk to it. It's like think of it as a translator.
Yeah. Okay. And so like in theory, if I was to have a cold card wallet, what would I do? I'd set up Electrum, I'd give it like an XPub or something like that, and then it would be able to see any transactions in or out from that wallet, and I'd be able to interact with it from Electrum.
Yeah, so you'd open Electrum, you'd see all of your transactions, you'd see your balances and everything like that, because you've given it sort of a view only into your wallet. You can then create those transactions or receive transactions, and then pass those across to your cold card to be signed.
Sign them there, right? Okay.
And then so you pass it back and forth with an SD card. Again, this is sort of ultimate privacy and ultimate sort of tinfoil hat mode, really, where you're not connecting those private keys to anything at all. It's all being shuttled on an SD card. And I've actually, shill time again, I've actually got a guide in my article section on doing exactly what we've just said, of connecting it to Electrum and walking it through step by step. So urge people to have a read of that, and there's lots of screenshots there and videos, and might help sort of paint a better picture than listening to something on a podcast. You've got something in front of you.
Yeah, well, I will be going through that myself then, because that sounds like the sort of one of the steps that I'm kind of missing at the moment, which would be really useful. So that makes sense. So Electrum would be very useful, and obviously my Samourai stuff as well. And then kind of final piece to the puzzle for me, if we kind of leave Lightning aside for now, because all I'm doing on my website is selling my art, which wouldn't really be Lightning and Lightning transaction. It'd be on chain. If I'm to, because again, BTCPay Server is in there. Like I can see BTCPay Server in myNode, but how would I go about? Let's say I set it up on my website. Someone pays me. They buy something from my website. Would BTCPay Server then have an XPub key, spit money or Bitcoin to my hardware wallet, and I could then see all these transactions from my Electrum server?
Yes.
Is there
So
any sort of
that's the general way that BTCPay Server works. The specific implementations within myNode and I think Raspiblitz currently come with the issue that you can only expose the full features of it interacting with your node over your local network, which obviously if you're selling art, in your instance art online, for somebody to securely access your BTCPay server that's connected to your node, they need to be on your local network, which is obviously not great.
no.
So I think that catches a lot of people out. Certainly did me when I first started looking into it. So, but basically, there's no sort of, unless you really, really know what you're doing, there's no safe and secure way to sort of expose that out to the wider internet. Certainly that's connected to your own node anyway. What most people do is they run an instance of BTCPay Server on a virtual private server. So it would be exactly the same interface. It all still goes directly into the wallet that you specify, and it's a really, slick interface. But obviously, it's not being backed by your own node. So there is a trade-off there that you're trusting somebody else's, virtual private server, basically. But obviously, these virtual private servers are ran on big, powerful servers that are protected from denial of service attacks and things like that, which your home network won't have. There is an implementation coming to the Raspiblitz, which they've announced, I think, last week, which is called IP2 Tor, which, without me butchering it because I haven't looked into it properly, is a way for you to expose your node to the outside world in a more secure manner. I think it works something like a subscription service where you might pay, I think it's something really cheap, like 40 sats for a week to run this service. I'm not sure on the specifics of how it works, but I would imagine that could be a fix to most people's problems of not having the need to run a private server, which obviously costs a little bit more. You're looking at sort of, I think, around £15 to £20 a month, to sort of run that BTCPay server in the cloud. So it's not quite the golden bullet at the moment, and it certainly caught me out when I just saw BTCPay server. Thought, oh great, I can make a store online and everybody will be able to find it. And unfortunately, it's not quite there yet. But I think this IP2 Tor that the Raspiblitz guys are working on might be a fix for that.
Interesting. See, I didn't know that. I just thought, okay, there'll be a way to have this, private, and I wasn't aware of that. So, like you said, like these things move fast. I'm sure we'll blink, and then this stuff will be here. But so for me now, almost, and you can correct me if this is wrong, but what I'm almost thinking is I'd just have on the website Bitcoin accepted, and then maybe do something like, if somebody wants to purchase something, I'll say, okay, I'll send you an address, and then that person could pay me, and I would maybe then run that through Samourai, and then once it's gone through Samourai, then I would send it to my cold card, and then I can monitor that from Electrum and just maybe miss out for now that extra step of having a BTCPay server, because it seems like it would either cost extra money or harm my privacy, or a bit of both.
Yeah, so two comments on what you just said there is, number one, just I would advise users to be cautious of, yes, absolutely great, the best idea to run it through Whirlpool, just to sort of obfuscate that transaction history, and just be mindful that if you're sending to cold storage after that, obviously once it's out of your Samourai wallet, you don't have those post-mix spend tools, so just be wary that if you're sending it to a cold card, obviously, the funds are going to be safe and secure, but it's what you do with it after you sort of spend it out of your cold card. If you were to merge it back together, you're potentially undoing all of that good that you've gained from Whirlpool. So just thought I'd add that in there, really. Just, I'd urge people not to be so hasty around, yes, hardware wallets have got great benefits, but they also come with trade-offs around coin control, particularly if you've just come out of Whirlpool. The other solution that might sort of fix your problem is there's a project called BTCPay Jungle. And what that is basically is a crowd-funded project that runs an instance of BTCPay Server on a Microsoft Azure server farm, and so they pay for that via community funding. But you can go on there, spin up a BTCPay Server store. Again, a little bit of trust is obviously you're trusting them; it's their node. But you can go on, create a BTCPay server. It's exactly the same interface. It looks identical. You can create your store, you can add your art to it, you can put your own Xpub in there from your cold card or from your Samourai wallet. So when somebody goes on there, buys your art, the funds go directly into whichever wallet you specify, and it's completely free. Obviously, these guys still need to pay server costs, so I would urge that if anybody that does take this option does donate to them, even if it's a small amount, just to go towards their annual server fees. But that's certainly, it's what I use for donations on my site, Max. So I've obviously got first-hand experience of setting that up, so happy to sort of support there if needs be. It might be a solution for you, certainly in the short term anyway.
Well, that sounds interesting. And anyone listening, go and support now, bitcoinqa.com. Go and support, because this is really useful for me, and I'm sure for everyone listening. And I know how much work goes into doing what I'm doing, so I can only imagine the work that's going into what you're doing. So anyone who is listening and thinking, this is really helpful and I want to try this out and do a donation, go and do it. And it means that these kind of things can keep going, and the Bitcoin Q&A can keep helping people.
Yeah, appreciate it. Obviously, I appreciate it, and it's a good way to get a feel for BTCPay Server as well, and how it looks and how it works from the customer's point of view, really.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like I say, I'll try those things out. I think I'll start with Samourai, and it'd be exciting to start using the node, and step by step, things are getting better. And it's interesting to hear you say about BTCPay Server, because it just didn't even cross my mind. It really didn't even cross my mind, because I was just like, yeah, this is all gonna be slick and private, and not that it's not slick, it's a great project, but I think I'll probably wait 6 months for that step.
Yeah, like I say, I'm pretty sure there is a kind of workaround that you can do, but again, it's far beyond my technical expertise as to how you would expose that without sort of completely butchering your home network and being liable to denial of service attacks. And just, it's a slippery slope. So I would stick to the guide rails for the time being. If like me, you don't really know the ins and outs of it.
No, that's great. Thank you for going through that with me, because I think I would have wasted a lot of time on it that maybe wouldn't have been necessary and could be better spent with the other things you've mentioned. So I hope anyway that has given everyone who wasn't already running a node, the different options of how to run one and what the options are, and also for people like me who maybe are already running a node but not quite sure how to set it up properly or a little bit scared of leaking privacy and all that kind of stuff. I hope that our talk towards the end has helped those people. Is there anything else on nodes that you wanted to cover or that you think we've missed that would be helpful for people?
Yeah, and now I think we've covered the basics. Like I say, there's loads of resources out there. Just want to reiterate, for the people, please don't be afraid to ask if you're unsure. Like you said earlier, Max, it really isn't as difficult as you might think. Just ignore the buzzwords. There's guides out there for all of them. There's loads of guides for myNode being the common one. The RoninDojo guide's got a really in-depth wiki page, and so the Raspiblitz, their GitHub's is very comprehensive, and so there's loads of help out there. You just sort of got to fight your way through the noise to pick out, the one that's relevant for you, basically.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. And what we'll do as well is I've really enjoyed this. It's been something that's really helpful for me to learn a little bit more. And I'd really like to do it again. I'd like to cover some of the other queries that I have and that I think other users have. So, yeah, it's really nice to be able to collaborate with you and have someone who can sort of hold my hand through all of this and explain it, and I'm sure the listeners will be finding it really useful. So I look forward to maybe next week doing another one with you, and we'll release a few over the coming weeks. And yeah, I hope it will cover all the questions that people have.
Yeah, it sounds good. I look forward to it. Like I say, anything that myself or yourself, if we can put out content that pushes even one person to take the plunge and run their own node, then it's job done for me.
Excellent. Thanks for today, and we will speak again soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, Max.